So here to discuss their different paths, career paths in games and what's needed to sustain a career across multiple decades, please welcome Andrea Pessino and Austin Wintory.
Hello. I just assumed the mic would work, so
yes, it
success. This is a very tightly choreographed two-person act. We've put weeks and weeks worth of rehearsal into our little song and dance for you, which is my way of saying that this is very spontaneous and has absolutely no plan to it. So we will definitely want to open it up for questions sooner than later, just to ensure that whatever it is that we yammer on about is actually of interest to you all, because obviously we have many overlapping shared passions, but very different career paths and very different sort of areas of expertise. But I thought it would be fun. I just found myself through the course of our conversations, and just so you're aware, this is apparently 48 minutes and 34 seconds left, which is probably officially the shortest conversation we've ever had, because we tend to say, hey, quick question, and then like time lapse of sun fall, sun rise, sun going down again, and I swear, just 5 minutes. So, but I had a thought during one of our lengthy conversations in the last couple days, talking about how you were reflecting on optimal ways of collaborating with studios and the idea of giving people space to do their work and to be creative. And I've been thinking about that nonstop, about how I've had to collaborate. I've had the privilege of collaborating with a lot of different types of studios, and they all have their own ways of working with composers. But something about the way you said it made me curious to just ask you, as if this was an interview, if you think there is like a single optimal way of making games, just because you've now worked at all these different studios, including your own, and had plenty of time to like pressure test different approaches. But I just found myself thinking, as someone who's obsessed with changing their process all the time, I had this thought in the back of my head go, have I been wrong for the last 20 years? Is it, instead of intentionally moving around and trying different things every time, should I be chasing like the one perfect strategy? Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I do not think there is a way to make games. That's actually one of the things that differentiates game making, in my mind at least, from other, even art forms that are more structured at this point. Even if you think of film, there's a lot of procedure there. Now, not to say that games are not getting that way. In fact, when you're dealing with the biggest games, the amount of production and procedure, and
Well, and arguably, films don't benefit from being ultra.
Neither do games, in my opinion.
Yeah, like because films are like that doesn't mean that's a good thing.
No, I completely agree. I also think that, like I said, past a certain threshold, you can't avoid it. We've gone. I mean, when I started at Blizzard, we were 60, 70 people, and it was just complete chaos. It was absolutely not even a shred organization. It was like people messing about for a couple of years and going, hey, we need to ship something. So, let's put it together. And it was beyond organic. It was just really chaos, which is too much. You can do that when you're just have hit after hit and you're rolling in money and you're independent, and then Blizzard went through lots of acquisition and so forth. But financially, it's pretty much a deadly strategy, unless you achieve some sort of logistics in your development.
Right.
But at the same time, there are these phases of creative development that just need to be protected. In games, as in film, there's a part where a team needs to just let their creativity go. They need to, operate without interference. They need to be able to work in a small group. You can't start, immediately structuring everything. Maybe you can. We have notoriously not succeeded very well at doing that. In fact, at growing at that rate, it's a completely different type of challenge. For me, the optimal way, the one that I find is the most conducive to to making great games, at least the ones that personally I've had the most success, is when you start with a relatively small group with a very clear vision, 15 to 30 people, and then you scale if and when you're ready to do so.
Right.
And this tends to be, again, great in from a theoretical perspective, but very difficult to execute in practice once you're dealing with milestones, deadlines, the need to scale regardless of whether you have found the thing or not. I'll give you a quick example. When we finished the order, we went through a very tough period. And at the time, Facebook, or Meta it is now, they came in, and in fact, we started talking to them very early. Rube was talking already to Jason Rubin, who was one of the founders of Naughty Dog, who gave us Daxter back in 2002. So it all kind of fits together. We worked with him.
Full circle.
US. And what they came back was, we love what you guys do. Have this chunk of time, it was a good solid 6 months, and just explore. Think of things you can do in VR. Think of, have your designers just go completely to their whim, explore anything. By that time already, and this we're talking 2015, are all these rules already written about VR, which seems very premature to me,
Yeah,
just,
I mean, the number of just as an aside on that, I've worked on a few VR games, and the times it's been told to me, even back then, oh, well, because it's VR, this is how we do music.
Yeah.
And I go, I don't even feel confident saying that about games.
Yeah,
Never mind this incredibly small subset that is barely even like a fetus. I mean, it is just so nothing still.
VR is a different medium entirely, and there are both technical and interaction challenges that are unique to it. But already there was this thing, you can now do full body. You can now show the full body. You can now show the arms. You were saying it's impossible to show the arms without having, your character eventually gets all tangled up and confuse the player and so forth.
It feels like a challenge.
It feels more like a challenge than a rule, but it was always stated as a rule. We've already tried this. You can't do it. And I'm like, all right, well, we're stupid. Let's give it a try. But just having that chunk of time. In fact, they were literally like the dream publisher throughout the process of development of Lone Echo. And I think we are extremely proud of what came out. And in huge part, it was just because, especially our designers, after the years of challenge and everything else, it was just a boost of confidence to be able to go, let me just
be
do
creative.
my art. Let me do my thing, trust that I will do the work. And again, publishers or even collaborators, they're not your friends, except for us. But they're not your friends, but you want them to be your partners. They have to be people you can count on, and they can count on you. Once you have that, then everything gets a lot easier than if you're always just fighting. So they're not your friends, but they're people that you need to be able to rely upon, particularly when it comes to publishers. It has to be someone that is there to help you. You have the same interest, right? You have the same goal. So
ideally,
to me, that is the ideal thing. And it works the same with a composer. I would never dream of working on a game, hiring a composer just to micromanage every freaking thing and tell him, you have to do this and this and this, and here's my notes, change this. I know you've been through, so.
Yeah, well, I've shared with him some of my, emails and things. I'm trying to put this delicately and vaguely to avoid besmirching reputations. But I've gotten feedback before on projects where, sometimes it shows up in the form of, just a quick sentence. Yeah, this works. Let's move on. There's no pat on the back. There's no effusive, like, this is the best music I've ever heard. It's for some people just being told, cool, let's cross this one off the list. It's the best that you can hope for. And honestly, that's probably my ideal, because it's dangerous territory to let your ego get flattered, especially when you're in the middle of the work, when you should be at your most raw and vulnerable. I think you should be when you're least precious about things, and you're not letting your ego kind of defend things that have not been tested. And so I like when it's just kept very matter of fact.
I'll do that from now on.
Yeah, it's fine. It's good. It works.
Yeah.
This is a nice one I like. But then the flip, the number of emails over the years, games, film, whatever, from people that are just these detailed analyses where, at 27 second point 3, the melody went up. Do we want to go up there? I think that the melody probably wants to go down there. And I noticed that it's on a French horn, and I think it could be interesting if it was on a euphonium instead. And I'm like, what? And I go and I look, and it's like, that part is silent. There's like not even music playing during that section. I just go, I don't know what to do with this information. I don't know, this is so specific. Half the time the temptation is just to go, here's the key, like here's the keyboard, you may finish the composition. You clearly want to. You're clearly eager to finish the music on my behalf. But at the same time, like your point about the partners and publishers, it is very much my job to be a partner in those relationships, and we're all aiming to make the best possible game or movie or whatever. And so it's very important to me that they feel happy in the end and also heard in the process. So sometimes it's this interesting mind game of trying to analyze what is the note behind their note? What are they actually saying? Because there might be actually something really laudable there. Every now and again I get lucky. I remember on Assassin's Creed, the audio director is this woman, Lydia, who was one of the most brilliant, amazing people I ever worked with, because she would, at the beginning of the process, the only time we ever had anything remotely resembling a hitch, which wasn't a hitch, to your point, it was like, hey, go take a month and just write a bunch of music. And so I wrote a bunch of stuff based on what I had initially kind of proposed. They hired me on the basis of this pitch I had made of what if the music was like this and that or whatever. And I kind of made this sort of aesthetic pitch suggestion for the game as a whole. And so then they hire me, and it was like, okay, now go actually see if you can pull off all that bullshit you said. And so I started and wrote a bunch, and then they listened to it, and they go, wow, this is awesome, it's interesting, it's different, it's way different from other Assassin's Creeds, but it's different from games in general, a lot. Then they went and put it in the game, and it was so dense with information that they were like, the combat in this game is now the most stressful experience I can imagine. So she said, it's not that we don't love it, but we love it as MP3s. We don't really love it as games music, game scoring. So let's find ways to kind of like walk back how much we're saying in a given moment. So I did a little bit of iteration on that, and then landed on our kind of what our formula was. And then, but what was interesting was that she would send these really long emails detailing all the things she liked. And it was a way of saying this cue is approved. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was skimming through the email, waiting for now here's the bad news. Because sometimes people do that, it's like the very corporate, we're going to do a compliment sandwich, where it starts very, very, sort of flatteringly, and then we move into the thing that we absolutely hate and is actually the only part we care about, and then we'll end on a nice upbeat. She wasn't like that at all. It was just, I was sure it was, but it was just this giant wall of text of positivity. At 27 seconds, you have this weird, like, scraping cymbal sound that I just thought was really unexpected for that moment and a great choice. And I called her and I said, while I am grateful, my ego thanks you for this kindness. This must have taken you 30 minutes to write this email. You must have better things to do. But what the genius of it, and I'm just, again, thinking about different ways people collaborate. The thing was, she was writing it, she wanted to give me this like forensic analysis of the things she liked, so that in case a month from now, and as we got closer and closer to the deadline, I was hitting a wall and the music wasn't working. We had this like paper trail of all the things that did work, that she was very happy with and that were signed off on, so that it could go back and go, oh, I see. Earlier you mentioned you particularly liked the way I did the drums in this one section, and then here I can't figure out what to do with the drums, and I suddenly can kind of immediately grab onto a thing that I know will work. Incidentally, we were in such good sync, it never ended up being useful, but I was convinced it was kind of a preemptive strike in case we hit a roadblock. And I'd never worked with anybody like that before. And it was one of those that since then I've kind of encouraged people to say, if something's really working for you, I'm not looking for compliments, but it's helpful to know, to the extent that you're even able to articulate it, what is working for you about this, because we may hit a moment and invariably it will be like the night before the deadline that we have to suddenly figure out a solution to something, and having a kind of recipe list, as it were, can be helpful.
Yeah, which brings it back to the fact that when you're dealing with creative development, which has been, I think it's the most fascinating part of this whole thing, analyzing and understanding what happens when you take a bunch of artists, and by artists I mean all game developers,
Yeah.
You stuff them into a room for many years at a time with all the dynamics and the issues and the stress and the ups and the downs, and you watch the dynamic evolve and the bonds that form and the challenges that come through. I think it's the most fun. It's the most wonderful part of making games these days as a team. Of course, there is again no rule, and there is a whole range. Games are the widest medium in the history of humanity, in my opinion. You can go. What was that you were saying that Tetris and Last of Us are both video games? It's
a thing.
if you think about it.
I talk a lot to folks that maybe don't know much about games, and I always use this example where I say, there's a lot of different genres of film, but fundamentally watching a film is mechanically always the same experience, whether it's a super experimental, art house film, or it's the latest Marvel film, everything in between. You still sit, hit play, at some point you run out of footage. Whereas in games, Pong or Tetris and The Last of Us or God of War are still both games, and there's no other medium like that.
And then all the esports and then the network games and all the way to even you can't exclude mobile games and everything else. It's just you can't sum it up. You can't narrow it to a bunch of rules and apply to everything. The one thing that is great about it still today is the fact that it's made by a team. And I think it's fairly unique because in the film industry, most other creative developments, you're dealing with very small groups that are, a unit, generally 2 or 3 people, if even that many, and everything else is just contractors and roles that are filled on a project basis. The idea of having a team that, for the most part, is nuclear and that remains this, a unit across multiple years, multiple games. It's fairly unique, and I fear that we're losing it to some extent. It's becoming more and more. There were a few years back where it seemed like everything was going to become, half outsourced, half in-house. And there is, again, particularly at a certain scale, there is a lot of it that has taken that form, but not as much as I thought. We had a lot of artists that, for example, have gone and go work in film, gone some film work. A lot of texture artists, lighting artists, camera artists. Sometimes they go Pixar or whatever.
Yeah.
And the vast majority really did not enjoy it. Many of them came back, either went back into games or even came back to work with us again, because it's just a different thing. You think you're going to be part of Pixar, but the odds of that are pretty non-existent. Most of the time, you'll be hired for a particular project for your skills, and you'll be, you'll be a very valuable member of the project, of course. But that's it. You're not really part of a whole. And I think that is the most precious thing about making games. That is still a thing. For us, we've been through. We've gone from 3 people when we started to, peaks of 170, 180. Up and down, and lots of people, of course, that come and go. But there are many people that they've been there for 20 years almost, that have been there, and that are, we grew old together. I don't want to sound like freaking, not that literally, but you know the idea.
But kind of literally.
It's very difficult, especially when you make transitions like being acquired or things like this. And now you're seeing these people, and you're being talked to by others in a way like, this is your subordinate. I need a report on the thing. I'm like, I've known this person for freaking, 15 years. We spend nights, struggling, and I really hope that remains. That remains in games because it's very valuable, and I think that's where the magic tends to happen. And when you look at, especially the larger teams, it's a handful of people that kind of really manage. It's difficult to find compatible, souls when it comes to creative stuff. And when you find them, you got to stick to it and not let it go, because that's where the back and forth happens. And I hope that has happened with us. We spent a decade.
Well, that's the thing. We for those unaware, with our history was Journey came out 10 years ago, March of 2012, and very shortly after it came out, I got a call from Sony who said, we're working on this other title, and the team really wants to meet you. Would you be willing to go meet with this team? They're called Ready at Dawn. And so I didn't know Andrea, I didn't know the other folks at the company, and obviously, and their game was not announced or public. This was to be, this was under wraps, the Order 1886. And so I remember I go down to Ready at Dawn, and I'm supposed to be meeting with the like creative director and narrative and game director of the game. And the person who kind of meets me at the door says, before we go, I have instructions to take you to a different office. Sort of like, oh boy, this is going to be, I hope there's somebody who knows that I'm here, lest this be I'm last heard from. It had that ring of like, we're going to take you into this back alley. And they bring me to this guy, so, makes an impression, just sitting there. And his desk is covered in DVDs of like Puccini and Verdi operas. And he had a copy of Journey and puts it in front of me and goes, sign this. And I was like, I'd never had a meeting begin this way. It was I was like, I think this is probably a really awesome way to be starting a meeting, but it's unprecedented, so I don't really know what to make of this. And then the thing that blew me away is if you open up the game disc collector's edition that had Flow, Flower, and Journey, the sort of that game company, sort of compendium of PS3 games, it has like it's a booklet, and it had sort of liner notes, and he wrote them, and I didn't even know that. I had this thing back at home, but I guess I hadn't ever read it.
Sony had pity on me because I was, you guys are all game developers, right? There are those moments in life. There have been several with me. I've really noticed a particular event. It happened, again, I'm aging myself, which is no surprise, but it happened in the 1980s when I played Karateka. I remember that. Elite was the same way. Final Fantasy VII was another one that just, and then later on, Red Dead Redemption, and then, Breath of the Wild. Journey was one of these games where I played the game and something is different. Because I played it, something has been changed in the way I see games, in the way I understand games. It's like a new door has been opened. It's like you didn't know this was possible. You didn't know that this was another creative possibility that you had, at your disposal. And when I played it, I was so blown away. And of course, for me, the thing that immediately stood out, it was the music. I know, always sucking up to him. But that music was it was really something else. And the very next day, I called Eric at Sony. I said, okay, I need to talk to this guy. That's why you came down.
Yeah, it was. Lucky me because, we worked on the order, and then I remember we were having dinner somewhere in the middle of it, and you started telling me about this idea you had. Yeah. You were like, I've been sitting on this idea for 20 years for a game, a very physics-driven, kind of like brawler type game, but just deeply physics-driven in really novel and interesting ways.
We should do another talk sometimes on horrible failures in game development.
I'll
tell the story of this one.
It was not our shining hour in the end, but it's like testament to the fact that, my attitude was like this guy had already become someone I just so valued having in my life that it was like, at the beginning, it really felt like this game may end up being made by the two of us. I mean, it was not meant to be.
It almost was for a while.
That's the thing. It was just like, hey, you're doing a thing, count me in, because we had bonded, in the course of the order, which was the extreme opposite. I mean, this was a very high pressure game, and a lot of dealing with Sony, and obviously, and I was collaborating with another composer, a dear friend, Jason Graves. And so it was like, there were just a lot of moving parts and a lot of, I hate to say politics, because that sounds nefarious and Game of Thronesy. But there's a lot of people. There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and there's a lot of pressure.
Can't avoid it.
Huge amount of money being spent and that kind of thing. And so there was like, this was a chance to go, let's just make a thing. And throw caution to the wind. And it was one of those where it felt like there were no rules. Like, for example, he being a diehard music lover, like you cannot fathom. He's always finding performances and things on YouTube of like, oh, check out this particular, like I found this soloist's take on this particular Mozart violin concerto, and listen to the way they handle the second movement. I mean, it's just, this guy can go incredibly deep. So as part of that, I get this message saying, check out this accordion player. I've never seen an accordion on this level before. Sends me this Latvian accordion player named Ksenia Sidorova. And so because we had already developed this relationship, I immediately just called her and said, how'd you like to play on this game we're working on? Just thinking that'd be a funny surprise for him. And so she did. She flew to London and recorded this amazing accordion player.
She's incredible. And before this, I used to think the accordion was the stupidest instrument that you could possibly, but she elevated it.
Oh, yeah. And I love that she had a theatricality. There's this she did a whole album of transforming Carmen into sort of like accordion plus orchestra, sort of like long concerto almost. And I've seen this performance of it where the orchestra starts off and they're going dum ba da da ba da dum ba da ba da bum ba da, and she's not on stage, and then she comes running, but the accordion is sitting here. She comes running in this bright red dress down almost like a fashion runway, just comes bolting to the stage. Orchestra is playing and picks it up right in time, and just joins in. And I was like, that's my kind of musician.
Around with the accordion. I mean,
yeah, and the thing's like the accordion weighs like 50 pounds too, and that's American. It's 20 million kilos. And so she's just got that level of flair that I was like, that's kind of the vibe that we're after for this thing. And the kind of...
Drop your mic.
I dropped the mic. It's attached to my head. It shouldn't be possible.
That one.
But
anyway, it was that kind of game development where we just...
There were no rules. We were just having fun and exploring.
And as long as we were having no rules, it was incredible. It was this small game. It was meant to be just a little experiment of really highlighting some very unique physics technology that we spent the previous 10 years developing, and we didn't have enough time during the order to really highlight all of these real-time deformable things. It was pretty freaking amazing, if I can say so myself.
It was. I mean, it was really. It's a shame that the game never really found the legs that it deserved. The game's called Deformers, but
nobody even. I can't even say that it was a commercial failure because people didn't even look at it. It's almost bizarre because we even tried giving it away for free. People wouldn't even download it, So we failed on some very, very basic level there, which, again, you learn your lessons. But we had an insane amount of fun making it. I don't think we ever, as a studio, we ever played the game as much as we did that one. Every day, people would stay late and just play. But then what happened is that we had an opportunity. We're a publisher. It was supposed to be just a passion project. We were just doing crazy stuff, experimenting. The whole world was supposed to be movable and affected by the player, with different physics, and everything was deformable, everything was destructible. It was very interesting, and it was really fun. We had all of these unique things like size. Everything could change in size, and it was an integral part of gameplay. And then a publisher got involved, and the little passion project, we were told, and this could be a real game.
Yeah.
Let's do it together. And then, from there, things started to change. I made every mistake. I was the game director on this. I made all of the mistakes. I signed off on making too many platforms and completely miscalculated, the impact that it would have. Anyway, but the worst mistake that we made, we started sanitizing it and turning it into something else because we were told this doesn't work, this doesn't work, that doesn't work. I'm like, well, but we're still searching. We're not quite done yet. But what was there was fun. And then we sanitized it to a point that people did not see a reason to try it, which is the thing that really was depressing to me because the game was super fun.
And it was very delightfully weird.
Yeah, it was maybe too weird. Maybe that was part of the problem. There was an accordion soundtrack written by a crazy... Even your soundtrack was probably the most insane thing you've ever done.
I think it is far and away the most sort of off-the-wall music I've ever done, and really kind of imagine I ever will do, because it was one of those where his direction was, write anything you want. That was it. That was
very specific.
Yeah, one sentence, like subject of the email, empty email body. Because the only parameters I had to work with were basically the game, it's kind of like a vaguely like Rocket League, matches. You play in matches. So it was like, okay, they can be as short as 30 seconds, as long as 2 minutes or something like that. So I knew that I didn't need to write music that could theoretically loop for eternity the way a lot of other game music is constructed. So I basically just was like, all right, in a way, I'm writing songs in that sense. Of like, here's a piece that is definitely going to have a beginning and a middle and an end, and I might have to find ways to shorten it, but otherwise, that's a pretty, knowable known. And everything that happens in between, it's just about supporting the wackiness of the game, however I get there. So it was like, well, careful what you wish for. I'm going to go completely nuts on this thing. Yeah, it was just so much fun. But the reason I bring it all, that up is that for me, it's all collaborations are you kind of hit on it organically, but just this idea of the team and the investment in the people. Like that, I know that was a very difficult project for you, and obviously very heartbreaking to see it get to see it get jerked around in that way.
The first part was the best, the most fun I had since the freaking 80s, honestly.
I remember you were on Cloud 9 all day.
Yeah, we were having so much fun. It was crazy. But then the end was torture. Yeah.
Yeah, and this guy suffered for this game, like you guys will never, like even I can't really comprehend. I mean, just witnessing how much he put into it and how much it was kind of being set on fire by outside forces that wouldn't have to deal with the consequences, and it was
well, again,
painful.
I don't want to. I blame myself. No.
Well, that's the kind of guy
if you're
you
the
are.
game director, the blame is on you. I mean, I made the fundamental mistakes. Even if I let someone interfere, it was my mistake. I should have fought harder, and
Fair point.
So I don't want to blame anybody but myself, but
talk to me afterward. I'll tell you who we can blame properly. But he's gracious, and that's good. No. But point being, for me, it was always about it's the relationship, it's the partnership. That part is that's the thing I always hang on to. That's what I love. When people call me, like someone I've never met before, and they ask, oh, we have a game we'd like to show you. The first thing I'm always looking for is to learn about the person making the call. My little hierarchy of factors that I weigh when choosing a project to work on is, up here is who am I going to be working with? Because best case scenario, it's kind of like going to war with somebody. Like I don't mean to be cavalier about that, but like it is someone who do I feel like there's literally nothing I won't do for this person? Because that's ideally who I want to work with, is somebody where they call in a panic and because something went wrong and this hard drive fried and assets are missing and or whatever, and it's the 11th hour and can you help us? And it's like, if your response is to go, oh man, I just sat down to dinner, it's like I would rather work with someone where I go, what do you need? How do I help? Because that I do my best work when I'm motivated on a personal level, and it's not even about the game. Of course, the game we're making or the project at hand, and specifically what it allows for me creatively is always going to be important as well, but it's never as important. Someone could call who I really care about with a game that is ultimately not for me, but if it's someone I really care about, I'm likely to say yes, because unless I just physically don't have the time in that particular moment, but I'll find a way to make it work most of the time because I care about them. I want to help them. If they think I can help, I want to be part of it. And then it's only well below both of those before we ever get to things like how much does it pay and that sort of like what are the logistics involved.
It's the mood, and we talked about the realities of game development. Okay, and like I said, I don't know how it is for other people, but in my case, and all the the almost 40 years that I've been doing this, almost every game has been just a struggle. It's never easy.
I think creative work in general is just not easy.
Yeah, true. But when you're an independent studio, particularly, and the whole system has always been structured with the whole publisher-developer model, to where you're always just as good as your last game, and right. if you even if you have the slightest setback, or either you don't achieve the goals that you need to achieve or whatever, you're gone, and everything's gone, and everything is lost, and especially when you're responsible for hundreds of people or even just your friends, and you don't want to let them down. Right. It's a very, very stressful way to live where, and again, people on the outside might go, I'm working in a mine, I carve coal out of it. You make games, big deal, but when it's your job and when it's what you do and your livelihood and other people's livelihoods depend on it, it's not just a job anymore. It's what you do. So
people have families and
you keep perspective, but for a lot of the game developers, it's their art. It's what they care about. It's what they have emotional and financial and, all of their investments, all of their eggs are in that basket. So you take it very seriously, right? At the same time, the best stuff happens because there's always the struggle, but the best stuff happens when there is the fun, And I don't mean the fun that is precludes, the fun is not working hard because you always work hard. It's having that feeling that what you're doing, it's going to be amazing, And
Yeah.
Occasionally, when you get the whole team on board, like when we were starting on Deformers, it was a small team, but everybody freaking loved it. It was like there was this sense that everybody's like, really excited about it. At the beginning with the order, our team they were so excited. It was amazing. There is this sensation, this feeling that,
in Lone Echo, I remember coming down to
Yeah.
the studio for a meeting on Deformers.
Yeah, yeah.
And someone goes, "You mind just jumping on this thing real quick? Show me," puts a VR headset on me. And I always was the guy that got really motion sick from VR. I want to love it, but my body screams no. And put it on. I was very nervous. And you've got the little, what are those called? The little controllers.
Yeah,
but
the
the
touch
specific ones
controllers.
that let you articulate your fingers.
Yeah, they're called touch controllers. They were new.
The touch, I had never seen them before. They were brand
they
new.
were still prototypes when.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I was going to say, I didn't think they were even commercially available. Because all I know is that I had these hands and I could kind of open and close them, and it was all in zero gravity. And so I'm floating in a spaceship or a space station or something. And the guy talking to me says, see if you can push yourself off this wall and drift into that open window. And I'm just thinking, I hope there's a trash can nearby because this is going to end ugly. And I gently push off, and I passed through this like little portal, and I'm in space above Saturn. And my brain was 100% convinced it was real. And it was like a religious experience. It was the first time I saw VR as something beyond a novelty, where I thought you can have life-altering experiences in here. It blew my mind. And I remember I take off my headset, and of course I'm sweating and like just barely not motion sick, but they were always so good at this. But I remember the thing that struck me was there were like 5 or 6 people from the team like excitedly watching to see how my reaction was, because they were everyone seemed so invested, and this was so early too.
Yeah, like I said, it was a very important project for us, just because, again, and to make it, I mentioned the Dream publisher earlier. The touch controllers that you mentioned are part of it, because when we started, there were no touch controllers, and Lone Echo was really a game that was developed with a mechanic first. In fact, with a movement system first. The fact that you could grab any, because this is a long discussion about motion sickness and what happens in VR and everything else. It's a whole complicated discussion, but the gist of it was that since we're not evolved to consider the possibility of zero gravity and motion in zero gravity. It's not something our brains are really familiar with. So you
don't even do
trigger
well
the
on
reaction.
boats. So.
Yeah, the problem is if you get yourself a VR headset on and you're in the game, you just push forward on something, and your character moves and you don't. Your brain goes, "What the hell is going on?" I don't get these corresponding inputs from what I'm visually registering or orally. So immediately goes, okay, check one, brain seems to function, heart is okay, we probably ate something wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and this is an innate reaction, because it's an evolutionary defense mechanism.
Right, yeah, of course.
So you have to find things like vehicles that help a lot, or teleporting, that's what a lot of VR games do. Or you can just, by the way, just like many other things, you can override it when you start young. You can train yourself to get over the motion sickness. But the zero G, that was it just worked. You had much more comfortable experience, because your brain, as long as you don't project players at 100 miles an hour, you could grab anything, any surface you could grab, and then push yourself like you would in space. So from that movement system, the whole game then emerged, because it had to, again, this is still a pioneer type of work. You're working in VR. It's early days, and you're experimenting. So
and this was also
2015.
Yeah, I was going to say 5-6 years ago, so 7 years ago.
So, but one of the things that happened was at the beginning we were using controllers. So the movement worked and stuff, but you had to press a button and to grab. And when they came out with the touch controllers with at Facebook, at Oculus at the time, and we tried them and we hooked them up, and all of a sudden you could really grab. And there's no going back.
It's a revelation.
It just. So we quickly had a discussion, and we said, we're going to talk to them, because the game was supposed to come with controller support as well. And so we said, we're going to talk to them. Let's not do the controller. I mean, even if you could just provide it as an option, you generally don't want to provide an option that kind of ruins the game.
Yeah.
Even if people say, oh, well, I'll play if I choose that way, but it still diminishes the experience to such an extent that you go, I don't feel like it. I don't feel like, ruining the experience on purpose just to give you an option to play the wrong way. Or I guess the wrong way is not the right word. And then I get quoted, and what's the right way?
Yeah.
No.
Wait, hold on. Say it one more time here. I just need to...
The way was not meant to be experienced.
Yeah. This is a conversation that comes up with composers all the time, and the way that games let you change the music and sound effects. Yes, I have many opinions on this.
It's a judgment call, but in this case, we felt that the difference was so substantial that it would make no sense to even allow you to experience it that way. It would just be a different game. So now we have to talk to the publisher and just say, we decided that this game with a very narrow audience for this brand new platform that you're trying to push, we want to narrow the audience even more by eliminating a bunch of others. And normally when you do that, this is how it works. You go to the publisher, and the publisher goes, I don't know, we're going to have to discuss this, blah, blah, blah. And then you do a whole bunch of, whether it's meaningful or not, there's a whole back and forth that can go on for months where you pretend that you're going to do it anyway because you can't just... So I still remember that Ru and I went up and we were talking to Jason Rubin, for Oculus, and when we went to meet him, and Ru had this whole thing prepared, to convince him. Yeah. And he goes there, we've been thinking, and we think that it's... he starts this emotional plea for not having the controller support, and Jason goes, yeah, okay, it's your game, do whatever. And he goes, what? He almost didn't register.
Can I give the presentation anyway? I worked really hard on it.
Yeah. Because honestly, they were in that mode where, you're the developer, you make the call, it's your game. You make the call, I trust. That's the whole partnership we talked about. Not your friends, but people that are there, that have the same goal as you do, and they trust what you can do, and it goes both ways. So... And I think
that.
Yeah, no, it's the best way to make games, in my opinion. It's when you finally have that. And the game did two things that I thought were extremely daring, at least for the time. And by the way, non-echo, I didn't work on it, so I can't take it. And even though, of course, I'm biased, it's my company, so it's an inherent thing. But I had another one of those moments. I was working on Deformers and stuff, as you well know. And when they put that visor on me, I was like, this is something else. It's still to this day, for me, it's the most profound VR experience that I've ever had. It felt like something different.
Yeah, I relate.
One of the things that they did, in the game, you play an android named Jack, who's voiced by Troy Baker, by the way. So imagine you're playing, you're the player, and your voice is Troy Baker's voice in your head. If that is not enough to have a good time, I don't know what is. And the other person, there's only one other character, at least in the first game, and the captain of the space station is Liv, and she's a human. So we have an artificial human with a player in VR with hands that can go anywhere, and with all the possible interactions, the player is completely free. And honestly, I thought that it was not going to be successful as an experiment to make a synthetic human in a VR game where it's all about immersion. This game is all about immersion. I told you that a lot of people that have played it would come back and say that they didn't feel like they played the game. They feel like they had a memory of living it. That's how deeply some people were affected. So it was so difficult to conceive that you could sell that illusion. It's all an illusion, right? Yeah. That's what games are. Because if you break it, it's all gone. The magic is gone, and you ruin the whole freaking thing.
Well, and in this case, if you also break it, you're also horribly ill, and there's a bunch of physical side effects beyond just the immersion.
Just having her not react in a way that feels, completes that fantasy world, that feels like it's plausible at the very least, it would have, especially because she plays a central role in later very emotional parts of the game. If you lose that illusion, if you lose that, the connection that a player has with this artificial character, it's over. The whole thing is not what it could have been. But they pulled it off. It's truly remarkable. And if you play the game, I highly suggest it. If you play one VR game this year, try it out.
I didn't work on it either. But I talk about it to people all the time as the thing. It was the game that made me, even just the prototype.
Yeah.
That wasn't even. It wasn't gameplay it was just pure gray, sandbox of possibilities.
Yeah. There was no Olivia when you played it.
There was nothing. It was just basically simulating the zero gravity environment.
Yeah, but when you step outside, and I think I'm at an age where I can safely say that I'm not going to go to space, in my lifetime.
No, I wouldn't count it out.
Yeah, especially not to Saturn. That's extremely
Well, that might be, yeah. We probably should have left already at the speeds.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but floating out there in the middle of the mining station and with Saturn right next to you, and you're floating in space, and
it was amazing.
It's quite a thing, and it's very different. Like I always said, I feel like it's a completely different medium than flat screen video games. It should be treated as such, just like touch screen gaming was a separate medium, and the best examples of entertainment titles on these different media were the ones that treated it as something different. It's the same thing in VR. I find the games that are, they're born not to be in VR, and they're born with the idea of being a controller game, and then gets shoehorned in there. It's never quite the same.
No,
at least not as exciting from an artistic perspective, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. There's a million thoughts that gives me, but I also just realized as we essentially run out the clock here, I don't want to sort of betray my promise of taking any questions and just letting that kind of drive us. So I'm pretty sure there's a microphone right here that is encouraged for any questions about
anything.
About anything, clearly. Obviously, careers and your career's about double the length of mine. I think, in games, but we've both been doing it for a little while. Don't leave us hanging. I consider it a review of being inherently uninteresting if no questions are inspired. So just know the feeling that you'll leave us with. And yeah, there we go.
There you go.
Yeah. What's up?
Hi.
I got a question about how was your workflow when you make music and sound effects for games? Oh, fuck, I can't speak. For games.
So,
do you use samples or any specific plugins or VSTs that's like...
Sure.
Yeah.
So, okay, there's a couple of questions mixed together there. In terms of workflow, first off, I don't really do sound effects. I'm not really a sound designer. There's two instances, I think, in my career where I've done what you could call sound effects. The first was my very, very first game, which was Flow. It was that game company's first game back in 2005 and 6. And that game, all of the sound is basically the music. So I did all the sound for the game, and I worked very closely with a guy named Paul Fox at Sony to kind of tighten the sound. But all the little creature noises and everything combined with the music underneath, it was all conceived of as one concept. The only other time I've done anything that you could label sound design was leapfrogging off of that. I did design the little singing that the player does in Journey. But that was also, again, that was collaboration with Steve Johnson, who was the in-house sound designer at Sony. And we made the sounds together. It's kind of like exactly a collaboration where I took notes from the score and he combined them with birds and things like that, and we made those little sounds, and we worked out together what the kind of gameplay of that would be. So just setting that aside sort of for the record, workflow, I mean, part of the reason why I asked that question at the very beginning was that my workflow varies game by game by game in a way that I intentionally try to lean into. So, for example, some developers come along and they intentionally wait because they want the composer to react to a game that's not obviously finished, but in a pretty solid state where you can look at it and go, oh, okay, I see what this is supposed to be. It's very clear. And so you're coming in sort of at the last minute to provide music on a thing that already has a lot of art in it and, story or whatever, mechanics fully fleshed out. And so, in that way, it's kind of like scoring a film in a very superficial sense because you're looking at a finished product-ish and saying, oh, okay, I know exactly the kind of music that could really complement this. That's actually the most rare way of working in games because most of the time it's more like on Deformers, for example, where our first conversation was, 10 years ago I saw this short film about physics on a moving platform, and it made me think a game could come from that, and we should start talking. And so there is no game. There's no like prototype or a build or something. It's just a conversation. And music inspired by initially just the idea in his head that he put over to mine, and then we start iterating back and forth. Journey was done that way. Genova Chen sat me down 3 days after Flower had come out and said, here's kind of what I'm picturing for the next game. And I wrote a little theme that day, which later was called Nascence and wasn't changed at all till forever. And that was just inspired by essentially his elevator pitch of the game, and then wrote music all through the process, including, like working with Matt Nava, who was the art director at the time. He and I would ping pong ideas back and forth, where, he'd say, I'm kind of picturing like this scene where it could have a really striking sunset or whatever, and then I go and write a piece of music, and then he says, ooh, this gives me an idea of a way to do it, and I'm gonna really up the contrast, and before you know it, they've made that scene where they're kind of moving in parallax through this tunnel, and there's the mountain and the striking sunset, and that sort of stuff just tumbled out of a back and forth, a collaboration. So in terms of the pragmatic question, I mean, I don't know, I change my tech setup all the time. I don't have any one particular go-to samples. I like to make my own samples, and I try to never worry about that stuff, because those are just means to an end. To me, it's like, if I like when I see an artist like Matt Nava drawing, I don't ask him what kind of pencil he's using. I don't mean to sound critical, but it's like, that's how I think of the tools. I just think of it as, if you go to like a Hans Zimmer or a John Williams, or any other of innumerable brilliant composers, you could give them literally anything to work with, and they'll find creative ways to make it great. That's always what I aspire to be as well. It's like, my process doesn't depend on having all the coolest, shiniest equipment. I'll use whatever I can get. And Flow is a good example. I had no idea what I was doing on Flow. Same with Journey. Same with everything. I don't know what I'm doing right now. So yeah, hope that helps.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
I just want to, you can hear me?
Yep.
Oh yeah, nice. I just want to say thank you for the talk. And I remember back when Deformers came out, it was really fun to play.
Oh, wow.
Oh, look at that.
You're the one that bought it.
Yes.
We heard about
Or
you.
at least you got it for free. One of the two. I apologize that it wasn't possible to play much.
I thought it was fun.
Yeah.
Played with my little sister. I completely crushed her.
Good.
I was also wondering if it was possible to get feedback from you guys of a game made earlier. If I could give you a link after.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Cool. So I'll see you after. And
Yeah, we're lurking about.
Yeah, of course.
That's an easy question.
Yeah.
Yes, period.
Awesome.
This is a question for Austin. Sorry, this is very hard for me, but I just want to say, first of all, that it's very inspiring to stand in front of the person that inspired me to become a game artist. When I played Journey, the first time, it was a very magical experience, and I didn't even realize the first time I played it that I was playing with another person before after the game was finished. And that was just so incredible. I've never experienced anything like that again.
You sound just like me.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, but my question is, as an environment artist, I was wondering if the environment in Journey is inspired by the music, or if the music is inspired by the environment, because I feel it fits like it complements each other in the game while you're playing.
Well, first off, thank you for those truly kind words. I wish I felt like whatever I could say would do justice to a comment like that. So please I hope my saying thank you comes even close to approximating how that feels. But in answer to your question, it's a bit of both. There's no question that Genova, the specific idea, environment in the broadest sense of a desert, was there before. That was there foundationally. So music did not inspire that, because Genova had this idea that because the game is meant to feel like you are connecting in earnest with another person, whether it's a surprise or not, he thought it would be of value to begin in an environment that is inherently sort of hostile, that even if you're not in danger, it's not like you can fail or die, or there's some, like, you have to go look for food or something. But even just standing in a desert, as humans, we're wired to understand in a very deep way that this is not friendly to my form of life. Like, humans need a lot of intervening technology and clothing and things like that to survive a desert. We just understand that on a very primal level. So he knew that in order to help make it feel really cathartic when you meet somebody, let's put you in an environment that has you on edge, even if subconsciously. And so that was baked in before, like that was an idea he had from the very, very start. But past that, the actual design was a lot of back and forth, where they would say, like I'll never forget one example, just a very specific example, was the scene about 2/3 of the way through the game where you are going up this vertical kind of temple. I always thought it looked like a missile silo. But you're in this vertical column, and you reach the top, and then there's this cutscene. It's one of the few kind of quasi-lengthy cutscenes in the game where you see the full sort of experience of what you've gone through laid out in a big circular thing, and then it culminates with showing you what you're about to face in the form of this mountain. And I remember they showed me what was like a storyboard sketch of that scene. And I just kind of figured, oh, they're going to make something that's going to be really amazing and cool and powerful looking. And so I went and just thought, okay, I'm going to give this everything I've got musically, within the framework of Journey, obviously. It can't be like suddenly we're bringing in giant epic. We can't do it kind of like we did 10 years later with big giant orchestra and stuff. It still had to feel like Journey, but it needed to rise and become pretty sufficiently emotional and bring the theme back, blah, blah, blah. So I wrote this piece of music, and then kind of as I delivered the piece of music, they got their first sort of working prototype of the visuals, and the visuals were really uninteresting. And I didn't want to say anything, so I remember I said, well, I think the music might be a little too over the top, because the music was telling a different story than the visuals were. The music was like, this is destiny and fate, and the visuals were instead being like, here are some facts about what you've gone through. And so I thought, it's my job to walk the music back. And so I said to Genova, I think, let me get you a new version. And he goes, actually, no, we need to do a new version. And he insisted on me not changing one note of the music and them using the music as the benchmark for the visuals. That's a very specific example of that happening in the game. There were lots of little like back and forth pull, where we definitely found it together. Because I had the benefit of working on it for 3 years. Like the little joke I always tell that's not a joke at all is I would write a piece of music, they would start to design around how that piece of music makes them feel within some very local area of the game. Then I'd play the build of that and realize, oh, the music I wrote could be so much more interesting because I see now what you're going for. So then I would write a new piece of music, and then they'd hear the new piece of music and go, ooh, this gives us new ideas. What if we tried this and this? So then they'd make a new sort of test build of the area. Then I'd play that and go, oh, the music is, no, that music sucks, fuck that, let's try something new. And we were like in this leapfrog until Sony finally knocks on the door and goes, is this game ever gonna fucking come out, or what's the problem here? 3 years of that, and I swear to God, we'd still be doing it to this day if they hadn't intervened and been the kind of adults in the room. So it's like, I say that jokingly, but kind of only, honestly, if I was still working on the game, I'd probably be happy. I loved it. I know that game company, I later found out, was sort of stressed and going through hell. I didn't know that at the time. The benefit of being a freelancer, I guess, and a slight outside contractor who wasn't in there 24/7. But in my mind, it was just an incredibly positive, nonstop, good experience, and really having the opportunity to kind of influence each other in genuinely positive ways.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm afraid we'll have to leave.
I was just going to ask, yeah.
The questions there, but I'd just like to thank Austin and Andrea for such an open and insightful conversation. I think it was a great end to the day, so thank you so much.
No,
guys.
thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.